Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to, depending on wherever you may live or however you look at your clock, this early morning or middle of the night bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they really do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to this middle of the night or early morning bonus upload, shall we? Today's first encounter. T and J have a cabin near the North Carolina-Tennessee line. On a Saturday night, they were both outside sitting on their deck when exactly 7:50 p.m. two Neanderthal appeared. Their words. From the tree line directly in front of their home facing them. T described them both as being tall, lanky men who were both facially deformed and had hairy patches here and there all around their naked bodies. She said their eyes were too large for their faces, but their cranium was tilted to the left side, like its head had grown incorrectly, or if there was a huge tumor growing from that side of their head. Jay agreed with T on her description, except Jay took it a bit further. He began to describe something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. Jay mentioned that one of these men was holding what seemed to be an arm, and I mean an arm only, the arm of a human person that had been snatched off a man or a woman's body. He recognized it as a human arm because of the smaller size compared to a feral arm, and also because Jay is certain he saw a dirty cloth bracelet of some kind on that wrist of the arm. The feral creature lifted up the arm and took a huge bite out of this arm that he was holding. Jay said the arm looked very purple, swollen, and decayed, and that this feral creature was carrying the arm around like it was a snack. T and J smelled an awful smell like a dead deer carcass as they stood up and ran inside. T is on the phone with the police while Jay is getting his gun. Jay ran back outside to shoot, but both the feral creatures had gone, but he saw some limbs from the tree still moving. T is on the phone with the police and is having a hard time explaining to the 911 operator what they had seen. Other than the flight of these two monsters that appeared in the woods, they had concerns about the human arm and felt it was very pertinent for the police to know. Long story short, two officers came out and they found nothing. The officers didn't quite believe them, but they agreed to search the area. Then Sunday came and T and J attended church. T explained that while at church, she asked for a special prayer over her home and the property and explained to the pastor that her and her husband felt that their home was being attacked by Satan and left it at that. After church, they returned to their cabin along with their two daughters and their spouses and their two grandchildren. T and J explained to their adult kids what had happened the night before and exclaimed that she would rather the grandkids not play outside. The day continues as normal until around 8 p.m., not quite dark. Jay's outside with his two son-in-laws when out of nowhere they all smell this awful stench. They're all started when a huge flock of birds rushed from the tree line, followed by 15 to 20 frogs leaping in a rush away from the woods. A family of deer suddenly jumped from the corner of the property, heading towards the back of their house, into the other side of the forest. The animals were running from something. Then something in the trees moves and grabs their attention. They see a creature standing watching them. It's standing there looking at them. This time the creature is described as a 6-foot-tall deformed man with huge shoulders, covered in mud and dirt, long black hair, an evil face with white cloudy eyes. In its hand was a dirty burlap sack that appeared to have something heavy in it. As they are staring at this monster, completely unable to move from shock, T walks out. She noticed the birds from the kitchen window and wanted to see what was going on. She sees all 3 men staring straight ahead into the woods completely still. She glances up and that's when she sees it as well. She said she felt the most evil presence she had ever felt, and worse than that night before. The creature only stared at them all, not moving an inch. It looked like an unreal wax figure. No birds chirping, no sounds from the woods whatsoever. They said the silence and still from the forest was just as scary as seeing this monster. T, frustrated and terrified, yells at it to go away. Everyone's in a panic mode, and they all go back inside of the house. One of the son-in-laws, Jay, grabs his cell phone to take a pic, and Jay grabs his gun. Once again, they return outside. The creature is gone, but that awful stench remains. Tonight's second terrifying experience. My wife and I went to the mountains a few summers ago. We sat our camper up off a public trail, off the Great Smoky Mountain Parkway 15 minutes outside of Cherokee. It was about 4 in the morning and I had to use the restroom. I won't explain why the commode in our camper wasn't working. That caused me to have to go outside and leak at the campsite public outhouse. I'm in my 60s and I can't hold my bladder like I used to. I didn't want to just go outside, but I did. I remember it being very hot outside and humid. Even at 4 in the morning, it was very sticky. It was dark, hot, and all I could hear around me were bugs and frogs. I walked the short distance to the little wood building that held the commode. There was a string you pull above you to turn on the single light bulb. After I finished, I walked out of the building and looked toward the camper. Sweet God Almighty, there's this thing standing by my camper door. It had long, frizzled hair, and bones in its shoulders and forehead protruded out like its bones and scalp plate were broken. It looked like a man that had been tossed in a meat grinder. It was naked, and I mean pure naked. It had a penis, and I saw the kneecaps. They looked messed up as well, like they had been smashed on and were swollen or something. It had very long hair, legs and arms, but that was it. Besides the long hair on its head, there was still even a balding spot right on the center of its head. So it saw me and I saw it, staring right at each other. I swear to God, all of those bugs and frogs I had heard, gone. No sound. Quiet as a mouse in the woods. It was so quiet I could hear its breathing, and I don't mean to be sad, but you know when someone is about to pass away, and they have that gurgle, fish out of water breathing? Well, that's how it was breathing, a rasp to it. This thing stood at the front of my camper door. I was terrified it was going to walk in on my sleeping wife. The camper had 2 solar lights in front that lit this thing up. I watched it turn, and I watched it slowly walk to the woodline until it disappeared from my sight. But in its hand was a dead rabbit. I believe it was a rabbit. It was holding on to it. Well, I mentioned bladder because I won't lie. I urinated on myself standing right there. I don't know where it came from because I had just got done using the bathroom, but I did. I urinated myself in terror. I ran to the camper, and when I got to the front door, I smelled the stench. It was horrid. I opened the door and locked it, staying awake until daybreak. looking out the side window towards the tree line. The smell still lingers at the camper door. Even now I can smell it. I've bleached it and everything. Rotting flesh, if you ask me. Tonight's third encounter. In May of 2019, my husband and I were visiting the North Carolina mountains to celebrate his birthday. We had just planned to drive and go sightseeing for a couple of days, but then decided to take a walk down the Pigeon Creek Trail at Mingo Falls. A friend had told us about the waterfalls. We got there early at around 8:45. There were no cars or people. We parked and started the walk up the long steps. When we arrived at the waterfall, we immediately noticed this creature. It was a wild man. It was naked and had bushy body hair. Its face was deformed and lumpy, skinny but tall, and we could see its chest. Its ribs were sticking out. The bottom half of the naked body was more hairy than the top half. The arms looked longer than they should have been, an odd-shaped head. My husband described it as being mangled and deformed. I said, "What is that up there?" And as soon as I said that, we both started to smell something awful, like garbage and vomit. We stared at it for a second, and we saw the creature's eyes were a white, cloudy color like it had cataracts. It seemed evil and startled that we had seen it. It was just standing there. The thing was carrying an old blanket in its hand and dragged it into the water. Like a child's blanket, because we saw colors in the blanket, but the blanket was wet and dirty. We watched it for a second, and then it crouched down on top of the waterfall and disappeared into it, as if it had dropped into some sort of bunker. We turned around and went back to our car and continued to look around us. We were terrified. We know this was not a Bigfoot. We know it was a man because we saw this man's uncircumcised penis. The legs were wet as well because all its leg hair was wet. This thing was about 6.5 feet tall, hairy, but we could see its skin underneath the hair. Saw its chest and ribs. It was just like a hairy, deformed, mangled man. Cloudy white eyes, big hands, and had full, dark facial hair, but looked a little bald on top of its head, with long strands of hair as well. We were going to check out the casino in Cherokee, North Carolina later that day, but we decided to go home after that. We believe this was a wild man monster. Today's fourth encounter. Mike lives near Irwin, Tennessee, along with his wife and their dog. Mike and his wife have had 2 encounters with these feral creatures. One encounter was recent. Mike said the first encounter was back in June of 2019 when he and his wife were both in their living room together watching TV, just about 8 p.m. They both were startled when they saw a deformed man's face appear in the window. Mike's wife literally yelled out in fright. It stared at them and gave them an evil smile and ran into the woods. They called the police. The police searched the yard and tree lawn but found nothing. By 11 p.m., while in bed, Mike and his wife, who could not sleep and had a gun nearby, heard disturbing laughter from outside of their window. The laugh was a lunatic type of laugh. Mike took out his gun and went to the door and out to his porch, where he yelled, "Get the hell out of here," and shot 2 rounds into the ground. Mike saw not 1 but 2 of these creatures run from behind his shed into the woods. Mike was so disturbed at the sight of them that he shut and locked the door. He returned to bed with his wife, and they both did not sleep that night. The following morning, Mike's wife routinely lets their dog outside to use the restroom. The dog will do her business, then will always return to the front door and scratch to be let back in. The dog has not been seen again since his wife let her outside that morning. Just recently, Mike's wife had a sighting. She was returning home from the supermarket and was unloading groceries from her truck when something up in the trees grabbed her attention. She saw a deformed man up in the tree staring at her and grinning wildly. She got back into the truck and left and drove to her husband's office. Mike and his wife don't know what to do because the police are not finding anything. They feel like they are not being taken seriously by law enforcement. Mike has installed several security cameras. The description Mike has given of this creature is taller than 6 foot, thin but toned body, long dark hair on their heads with patches of hair throughout their bodies, pale gray with long fingernails. Only one tooth is left in its mouth. Eyes are larger and wide and are black. Looks like a man Bigfoot troll mix, deformed features in its face and head. Update: since Mike has located his dog 8/10 of a mile into the woods. The dog was not in great condition, and we will not go into details here, but the fur is how he recognized the dog. To be conservative, there was not much left but fur and bones. The wife believes that the feral creature is responsible. Mike and his wife continue to have sightings, but mostly up in trees. They have excluded the police because the police never find anything, and have told Mike and his wife that they were most likely seeing campers throughout the woods. Mike's wife has stated that she is aware of times where this creature is near because of this foul odor. It's a very distinct odor. The wife seems to be having more sightings than her husband. They believe this feral creature is more interested in her. They have had one additional scare of something peeking through their window and describe the face looking like a very evil Smeagol from Lord of the Rings, describing the hit-and-miss strings of long hair on its almost bare scalp. They have both heard a lunatic type laughing in the woods at night. It is not an everyday occurrence, but they are still terrified. They are mindful and careful. Mike states it's one of those things when you try to live with it, but stay out of the woods and stay armed, just in case. The wife is sure that these feral creatures are not Bigfoot or campers just messing with them. Final encounter. I went on a family vacation to the Great Smoky Mountains. I'm not sure what month, but it was the spring of 1987. We'd been there for a few days, exploring everywhere. This is something we've done every year. This year it turned out to be very different. It was the day before we were about to leave and head back home. My dad decided we would take a walk down the trails and stream. We were at Deep Creek Loop Trail. My dad had taken his fishing pole. Dad, Mom, my brother, and myself were walking by the stream. My brother and I kind of walked away from the stream a little ways off the trail into the woods. I'm not sure how far we were from our parents. I do know I couldn't see them anymore. I don't remember if my brother or myself saw it first. From a side view, my first thought was it was an animal because of the movement in the trees. So being very quiet, we stepped to the side of the tree and hid, so we'd be able to watch it. What I thought was an animal was indeed not. The creature heard us and turned towards us. What I saw was horrifying. It was bent over, devouring a dead animal, possibly a deer. It was tearing at its guts and eating. It had bloody hands, face, and chest. I saw enough to know that it was not an animal. But, dear God, it was not a human either. It had bloody flesh hanging from its mouth and hands. It had a large forehead that looked kind of like it had knots. It was very hairy, but not as hairy as a bear or a Bigfoot. And between the blood on the skin and dirt, it was a deformed man. We were so scared my brother took off running fast. Then I followed. I turned just for a second to see if it was still coming after us. As I was turning to run also, it took off running the other way. It didn't stand up totally straight, but I could tell that it was a male. By what I saw, it was at least 6 foot, may have been taller. Since it didn't stand straight up, it's hard to tell. It was pretty thick, but still very skinny and deformed. What got me was how it looked like a human man and creature mixed. I could also smell an odor that was like flesh and garbage. When we ran back to my parents and told them, my dad at first thought we might have been trying to pull a prank on him. He played along and walked back to where we had come from. A minute later he came back and said, "We have to go now." His face was pale, like he had lost all his color. We went to the ranger and told him everything. He said he was going to call another ranger and they would go check it out. He thanked us as we drove away. That was the last visit. I had nightmares for a while, but I never spoke about it to anyone. I still don't know what we saw, but this man was a mixture between human and monster.
And there you have it, folks. This middle of the night or early morning bonus upload. Some very horrific experiences to either end the night or start the day. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you for supporting the channel. It is your support, after all, that helps the channel to continue to grow and go. And honestly, what gives people a place to share their experiences, ideas, and theories, judgment-free, just simply treated with the respect that we all deserve. Thank you. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, friends. These creatures are real, they are out there, and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for answers, and God bless.